hCGChica. So guess what? It's time for my second quarter of 2014 update on maintaining my hCG weight loss. If you want to check out my first quarter update, I will link to that in the blog post that goes with this video on my website, hCGChica.com. And so this is kind of going to be a pretty in-depth video. I want to share with you basically, struggles that I have faced in the last few months with maintaining my weight, as well as how fitness can really play a role in changing your body and helping you maintain long term. And I've got some photos and stuff to show you guys today. So the most significant thing that I, want to start off with is that it's been a whole year and 9 months. So we're getting on 2 years here, a whole year and 9 months since I have used hCG whatsoever. So I completed my final round of hCG in November of 2012, and here we are. It's actually now the end of July of 2014. So today I'm about 127 pounds. I'm about 125 to 127 at any given time. And it's been a pretty interesting last few months. There's definitely been a number of trials, but there's also been a few really positive things. And so that's what I'm going to talk all about today, in the hopes that it will help you guys figure out your way through your weight loss journey and through your maintenance journey. So the things that we're going to talk about today are my 5-pound weight gain that actually was almost all fat in just a few weeks, that didn't have any apparent reason. And let me pull my notes up here. I forget what I'm supposed to be talking about. I'm going to talk about the factors that may have caused that weight gain, how I've actually lost most of it already without hCG, what didn't work to lose the weight that I gained, and also how health can affect our capabilities and what we're able to do. And the last thing is actually how CrossFit made my body look completely different post hCG, and I've got some pretty eye-opening photos to show you guys about that. So since my story, there are definitely some trying parts about it, things that I'm going to share that are personal things that have been a struggle for me. But since the story doesn't end on a bad note, I want to start out with some of the positive, and I'm going to show you guys a picture of what I currently look like. I took the photo July 15th, 2014. Like I said, I finished my last round November 12th, 2012. I promise I have not used hCG since that time. And so you can kind of see what I look like. As you look at the photos, you can see that I'm wearing the exact same pair of jean shorts in both photos. They're a size 2. Now, as you look at them, just for comparison's sake, I finished round 5 of hCG with about 21 pounds of fat on my body. That's that first photo. And then in the second photo next to it, I have about 23 pounds of fat, so just a couple more pounds of fat, plus 5 more pounds of muscle in the photo there on the right. And you can tell there's a difference there, because you'll notice that the legs of the shorts, same pair of shorts, they're much snugger on me now than when I finished my round. But what's funny is, I never thought I'd be proud of having bigger legs, but that's just what CrossFit and weightlifting has done to my mentality. The bulk of my leg growth, if you will, is from shaping from muscle, and that will actually be brought home pretty clearly as you see some photos later. And I know it's not for everyone. Some really want to just have a very, very lean look, and I respect that. But for me, for many years, it's really not my body shape or my body type, and so chasing after that for so long and never being happy with my body, even though it was actually very fit, I'm in such a better place now, where I'm actually proud of the body that I have. I'm very fit. I've been able to work with the type of body that I have, and I feel very comfortable in it, and that's such a good feeling for me to have. So again, just to clarify, my legs are a bit bigger now than when I finished hCG, but this truly is mostly due to muscle, and I love the shape that they've given my legs, and I'm personally okay with that. If that's not what you want, it's easily avoided by, just not working out or running a lot. It's usually more weightlifting that kind of gives shape to your muscles. But anyway, so with all that said, let's get farther in. I want to give you guys a little fitness update with CrossFit then and now. I'm going to start off with a few clips of what I've been doing lately at CrossFit so you can see.
Let's do it. Come on. Ow! What's up, baby? No, 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 no. Return to the max, get it what it is, what it does, what it is, what it isn't. Looking for a better way to get up out of bed instead of getting on the internet and checking a new hit me get up. Thrift shop, pimp truck, walking, little bit of humble, little bit of cautious, somewhere between like Rocky and Cosby. Twitter gang, nope, nope, y'all can't copy ya. Bad moonwalking, this here is our party. My posse's been on Broadway, and we did it our way. Grown music, I shed my skin and put my bones into everything I record.
Push, 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 push. You got it, you got it.
Now keep in mind, when I started CrossFit, 2.5 years ago, I could do nothing. I mean, literally nothing. When I, when I did squats, it was with just the bar, no weights on it whatsoever, and even that felt extremely heavy. When I did the initial training for CrossFit, all we were doing was air squats. It was just basically squatting with nothing on you. You're just standing there and squatting down and back up. No bar or anything, and just to kind of, get your form and all that. And I was so sore for several days. I could barely walk. I had to call the trainer and delay the next training because I was too sore. I was like, I can't move, let alone do a training workout. So that's how I started out when I started CrossFit. Granted, I had lost a lot of fat with hCG and I was at a normal weight for my height, but I had like no muscle tone whatsoever. I was very out of shape because of my chronic illness, which I'm going to talk more about in just a little bit. I had been forced to become pretty sedentary for a number of years, and it had really taken its toll on my body. When it came to push-ups, not only were push-ups done on my knees, but I couldn't even on my knees. I couldn't do a full push-up. Like I couldn't get to the ground. It was just like, like that. That's all I could do when I started. And so, if you're watching the video of this, you can see in the videos just how far I've come in the last 2.5 years with CrossFit. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, obviously you're not seeing anything, in which case you can go to my blog and there's going to be pictures, or you can go and check out the video on YouTube. But anyway, it's obviously a drastic difference in my capability since I began CrossFit. When it came to pull-ups, basically it was forget it. I actually have a funny memory about this, and again, this was when I was, I was in the 120s as far as weight goes with hCG. My husband wanted to help me because I couldn't do a pull-up at all. For women, pull-ups are pretty tough to be able to do, even when you're fairly fit. So my husband thought he'd help me out. So we had this pull-up bar in one of our open doorways, and he piled a bunch of books on the floor. So he thought, like, if I stood on this stack of books, I'd be, instead of like from a hang position, I'd be a little closer to the pull-up bar, and he thought like, oh, and then from that point I'll be able to pull myself up, you know. So he gets it all set up for me, and you know, I stand on it, and he's like, okay, so just now go ahead and pull up, you know. And I'm like, I'm trying, but I'm not going anywhere. So I mean, I couldn't even, that didn't help at all. So that's where I started, and then now you can see the type of pull-ups that I'm able to do. Just so much difference in my strength, and it's something that really brings me satisfaction and makes me feel happy. So now I want to talk about how fat loss and the pursuit of fitness can actually change how your body looks. I didn't completely realize just how much CrossFit has changed my body shape until recently, when I came across some bathing suit photos that I took after my second round of hCG. Now, I never intended on sharing these publicly. They were just going to be my own. In fact, they're the only ones I ever took out of all the before and after photos of every round. However, it's really showing you these, that from then to now, it is really the only way to show you guys just how much your body can change from working out. Because a lot of where my low muscle tone and my fat was on my hips and upper thighs. That's where a lot of it was, and which is always hidden when I have the shorts on. So I want to show you a comparison. The first bathing suit photo you'll see is me at 127 pounds. The after photo is me at 127 pounds. I mean, literally the exact same weight, but my body fat percent is completely different. In the before bathing suit photo, I have a higher body fat percent, which means more of me was fat, less of me was muscle, and that's because I was a sedentary person. I was very, you know, I didn't have that muscle. I hadn't been working out. So even though I had lost weight and I had definitely had lost fat, at that current place that I looked a certain way. In the after photo, same exact weight, I'm a smaller size. And as you can see, I mean, I'm just gonna put the picture up right now so you guys can see what I'm talking about. If you'll take notice, especially of my legs, my body looks completely different. I just was shocked when I saw it. I haven't looked at those old photos in a long time. And as you can see, my legs just look completely different, and I'm the exact same weight. This is what CrossFit and weightlifting can do. And I'm not necessarily talking about just any type of working out, like running or dancing or, you know, stuff like that. Those are all good things, but it's actually, in my mind, the building of muscle, which creates shape to your legs, that can change how you look. And, you know, I'm often asked why I did 2 more rounds of hCG, or a few more rounds of hCG when I had already gotten to a normal weight. Because they're like, well, why would you do more? That seems extreme. This is why. Because how you look at a weight is very affected by how much of you is fat, how much of you is muscle. So just getting to a normal weight doesn't mean a whole lot. I definitely looked good in clothes, you know, in the before picture at the 127, but I'm in a much better place now, and that is why I chose to do that. I chose to use those subsequent rounds of hCG to lose additional fat, and then I took breaks from the hCG, and for several months I would do CrossFit, and during that time, you know, build a lot of muscle. The difference in the 2 photos that you're looking at is, in the after photo, I have 12 more pounds of muscle and 12 less pounds of fat. So that's why you can see such a huge difference in how it shapes your body. The reasons that I like this outcome, you know, is 1, I can eat more and still maintain because I have a higher level of muscle mass. I feel very comfortable in my body, the most comfortable I've ever felt in my whole life. And that partially has to do with changing my mental view of what a good body looks like. I'm of smaller clothing size at the same weight. And, you know, lastly, I'm just proud of what my muscles can do, of what I'm capable of when I go to CrossFit. It's not so much just what I look like. To be honest, I almost never even look in the mirror anymore, which is funny because when I was younger, I felt like I was constantly looking at myself and checking how my clothes fit on me and how I looked and whether I looked fat or not, even though I was thin. But I almost never look in the mirror anymore, but I know what my body is able to do physically, and that makes me feel very good about my body. So, the hCG protocol definitely took me a long way from where I started. I'll show you an image of that right now, of where I started out before hCG. So I'm very grateful for that, but it's just some food for thought for some of you who may be getting closer to the end of losing most of your weight, just to see exactly what things like CrossFit and weightlifting specifically can do for your body to take it even further, and to really change things if that's something that you want to pursue. So as far as how long it took me to get from picture 1 to picture 2, where I'm at the same weight but I look totally different, it took 2 more rounds of hCG, and it took 2.5 years of CrossFitting. On average, I CrossFit about 3 times a week in the last couple years. So it's really not too bad. And to be honest, I've looked like this for quite some time. So it's not like you'd really have to do weightlifting and CrossFitting for that long in order to change your body that much. This is about how I've looked for a while now. So probably, a good year and a half of CrossFit, and you could be looking like that. Another thing I want to mention real quick is I never did CrossFit during hCG. I do get asked that question a lot, and it's a good one, and I understand it's like the idea you feel like the more you do, the better the results you'll get. But what I've actually found is oftentimes what you end up doing is really just asking too much of your body, and so your body just is like, no. And then you can actually have worse results. So you really want to be balanced in how you approach it. When I have done hCG, I really used it as a time to focus on the purpose of it, which is fat loss. Then when I'm doing CrossFit, I'm focused on the purpose of that, which is muscle building. So I don't try to put the two together. I just find it ends up being too much, and then you end up feeling really crappy, and your results can sometimes not be as good. So next I need to start talking about health issues. And this is important because it directly relates to how I maintain my weight and how I deal with struggles in everyday life and still maintain overall. Some of you guys may know that my family and I physically moved locations a few months ago, back in April. And not only is moving a 3-bedroom house very difficult. I mean, there's a ton to pack. It just takes a lot of energy to do that. Right about the same time, my health started to decline, be on the decline again. Now, I've discussed in other videos and blog posts, which I will link to in the article if you go check it out, but I've discussed that aside from having Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease involving your thyroid, aside from having that, I believe that the root cause of most of the symptoms that I deal with, kind of on an ongoing basis, but it goes up and down, is Lyme disease, chronic Lyme specifically. Now, I say I believe because I don't have testing right now to prove that that's what I have, but I have done enough research now in the past 10 years to feel 99% sure that that's what I deal with. Now, I shared with you a treatment back in November 2013 that I did. It was an alternative treatment for Lyme that I experienced amazing relief of my symptoms using it. I felt probably like 90% better for about 4 months after that. So from like December to April, about the time we moved, I felt, or maybe March, I felt really, really well. My brain function was so much better. My energy was so much better. Just all the different things that I deal with that you guys aren't always aware of. I realize on these videos I look extremely well, and I certainly do have, many good days, and I rise to the occasion for these videos. But there are a lot of things that I deal with off camera that I feel are pretty challenging and that I know are not normal because I've been normal and I know what normal should be. And this isn't new to me, having symptoms creep up again. I'm 33 and I've been dealing with different chronic illness issues. I didn't know what it was for a long time, for over 10 years. And during that time, I was always researching, always trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and trying all kinds of medical and supplements and all kinds of things to try to feel better. And in the course of doing that, I would occasionally find things that really helped for a while. And so during those times of feeling better and feeling well, sometimes it lasted only a week, sometimes it lasted for several months of feeling like a well person. And during those times, I felt like me, like the person I really am. I would be extremely productive. By nature, I'm a person who just likes to always be doing things. In fact, the other day, my son, he's a lot like me, and he was talking about how he wishes that we didn't have to sleep, and why do we have to sleep? And I kind of had to agree with him. Like, I know what you mean. It's like I just always want to be doing and creating and producing things and being productive. And so we're both like that. Of course, we talked about why sleep is important. but so that's the type of person that I am, and like many of you, no doubt. But every time my health takes a dive again, it's never any easier to deal with. And this has happened so many times. It's a little bit like a roller coaster. And you'd think after a while, like, I'd get used to it and I'd adjust. But that never happens. When I'm well, I tend to forget about all of the crappy stuff I've dealt with, and I move on and I'm living my productive life. So then when some major symptoms hit me again, it's always very shocking. It's shocking and discouraging and makes me depressed, just because, I so enjoy doing and living life. I think as humans, we were born with that innate need and desire to be productive and to be useful to others and to help. So it's very frustrating and discouraging when your body just will not cooperate, when you cannot get your body to do what you have in your mind, and what you have with your desires. And for me, this is compounded by the fact that the illness that I deal with is very odd. The symptoms are very strange, and I look very well on the outside. There's certain things that I can do that not everyone can do, like CrossFit. So it appears on the outside like I'm very healthy. And so as a result, it makes it very difficult for people to understand my symptoms and to believe me. And so there's just that compounding effect there, where there's times when people in my life either don't believe what I deal with, or they think I'm making it up. Maybe I'm not totally sane, or there's just something wrong with me, that I really am fine and that I'm just making stuff up and I'm paranoid. And so that's very difficult to deal with. I think we all want to be taken seriously, and to be made to feel like almost like you're lying or that you're making stuff up is a pretty horrible feeling. So that's difficult for me as well. It's difficult when you're in a position where you don't feel understood by a lot of people because of how things appear on the outside. Sometimes I think to myself, that slowing down and being more limited is somehow easier as you age, because it's just what happens. If you're getting into your 70s or 80s, that's what's going to happen. But to be honest, it probably never gets easier. I think we just always want to be doing things, and to have to start living life at a lesser degree is probably just never easier. But part of what makes it hard for me is that being that I'm 33 and I have a young family, I have a young son and my husband, there's a certain level of responsibility that I still have. I have to raise my son. Every single person that I meet who meets my son tells me he's the most energetic child they've ever seen. This is pretty much always even young 20-year-olds who are energetic themselves, they were like, wow, he has so much energy, doesn't he? And I just nod like, yes, he certainly does. So, I have to try to keep up with that. I can't, but, there's just a certain level of things that I have to be able to do in order to raise him in a good way. So, it's just definitely a struggle at times. So, with all of that said, because of that, I don't just accept what I have. I want to get better. I have not come to a place where, like, okay, this is just how I'm going to be. I can't accept that. It's just not a level of living I'm okay with. So I have to have that hope. I have to keep trying. So I am still searching for a long-term solution or way to feel better, at least most of the time. So far, that cold laser treatment that I had back in November was the most effective of any of the treatments that I've had as far as relief from symptoms and how long it lasted. So that's something that I'm trying to pursue locally now where I've moved to. But it's easier said than done because unfortunately, as a lot of you guys know, many alternative treatments that actually work end up being very difficult to get access to because of the powers that be, and they like to make all kinds of laws and stuff like that. So that hasn't been too easy, which is why I'm not, probably why I'm not feeling a whole lot better at this time yet, because I haven't been able to access the treatment. So that's something I'm currently still working on. So that's kind of my little update on my health stuff. If you want to know more about it, I have a couple other posts where I've talked about what some of my symptoms are like and stuff like that, for any of you who think you might be dealing with it. Basically, chronic Lyme can cause all kinds of other effects in your body, and like I said, I have Hashimoto's. I've had adrenal fatigue a number of times, and things like that, and there are ways to address some of those other issues. But all of that, the health stuff that I was dealing with, I'm mentioning it because I want you guys to know me as a real person, and that I'm real and I deal with struggles too. It can be discouraging, if you're struggling with maintaining weight or you have things come up in life that make it difficult, and then you feel like you're watching this person on YouTube that just has no problems and it's so easy, and so you're like, man, what's wrong with me? So I don't want you guys to think that. I have struggles too that do affect my ability to maintain my weight. So as a result of gradually feeling crappier and crappier, I gained about 5 pounds soon after I moved, and I went to have a body fat test done because I was like, oh my goodness, I couldn't pinpoint a reason, like an outside reason that I was like, oh, I'm eating too much, or I'm not working out, or those types of things where why you gain the weight. This was unexplained weight gain, and it was about 5 pounds. I went from 124.5 to 129.5, and it happened literally in the span of a couple weeks. It's 1 minute I'm 124, feeling fine, doing fine, and the next I'm 129, and all of a sudden my size 2 jeans that I wear don't fit. I can squeeze them on, but I can't move in them. So I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Now, just to give a little background here, before this time, I had been stable at 124.5 for several months, a long time. And I ate the way I ate, I did my little workouts, and it just stayed there. It was very stable. And gaining a few pounds, honestly, is not the issue. Being 129, having to move up to size 4, which I'm technically a size 4 too. Size 4 is my comfortable clothing, but being 129 is still a healthy weight for me. It's not like that suddenly made me overweight. So that wasn't the issue. I wasn't bothered by that. The problem was that it was unexplained, that I didn't know why I gained that weight, and also that I didn't know if it was going to keep going up, because obviously something was amiss, right, in my body, and I didn't know what it was, and if it was left untreated, it could continue, right? So that was what the problem was. What was so odd about this was that outside of my health and the stress of moving, nothing else about my routine had changed to produce this. That's what's so weird. I had a very consistent routine of going to CrossFit 4 days a week. And that never slowed down. In the move, the day we moved on a Wednesday, I was at CrossFit, my new CrossFit, the very next morning, Thursday morning at CrossFit. So it's not like, oh, it took me a few weeks and I stopped working out and so I gained weight, I was right on it. So that didn't change. The way I eat is very boring, you could say, because I tend to eat the same things. I kind of find a groove. I also have a lot of food allergies, things that, I think I kind of have like maybe irritable bowel type stuff. I don't know, but just there's a lot of foods that don't feel good in my tummy and in my intestines. And so that does limit me. So I find the foods that feel okay and then I just eat those over and over every day. So I was doing that, you know, for several months, no issues, totally fine. So that hadn't changed. A lot of what I ate was like, you know, my raw kale salads, P3 smoothies, and a lot of home cooked meat. It was kind of the main staples of my diet. Another thing that was different that I noticed was that my occasional intermittent fasting all of a sudden wasn't working. So intermittent fasting, and I've talked about it before, is one of my tools for keeping things in check. Whenever I, you know, we all overeat at times or maybe just go a little above and beyond. And so I've used intermittent fasting for a day here and there to bring back things in check, and it always works. But in this case, as I saw my weight going up during those few weeks, I would do a fast day and it didn't help. And I would try it again and it would not help. And my weight would just still keep going up. So that was another thing that was like, okay, ding ding, there's something not right in my body right now. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on. You know, I did think to myself like, okay, I guess I've eaten a few more burgers and fries, you know, out to eat than normal during the moving period, but certainly not 5 pounds worth. And I've been able to go out to Thai food. You know, there's sugar in the curries, there's rice. I eat plenty of rice when I go to Thai food, and I've been able to do that for a long time on occasion and not gain weight. Additionally, when I was gone for a whole month while I was getting the treatment for Lyme back in November, I talked about it and I'll link to the post about it, but I ate out a lot more that month just because of, you know, the situation that I was in. And when I came home, I actually weighed a whole pound less than when I left. And I ate out at Thai restaurants quite a bit and other restaurants, and I was able to maintain. So again, I thought like, well, that's possible, I suppose, but I don't think that that's the issue because it's not matching up with, you know, my other experiences. Now, the other funny thing is, you know, I think we all get into denial sometimes, and so at first I thought, well, maybe most of it's muscle, right? Maybe. The thing is when I transferred CrossFit gyms, there was more of a focus on weightlifting at my new one, which I like. I actually wanted to do more of that. And I was noticing that I was stronger when I would do different lifts, that I was starting to be able to do more weight. At the workouts, I felt strong. I did. I didn't feel weaker. I felt like, you know, even doing jump rope, for instance, it's like if I had gained fat, wouldn't I feel heavier? Doing that type of stuff or doing push-ups, I should feel heavier, and I didn't. I felt stronger. So that was another odd thing. So I'm like, well, maybe, you know, but then there was the true thing going on, which was that my jeans really didn't fit. And granted, muscle does take up space on your body, but it definitely seemed like too much, you know, for it to be all muscle. So I knew I had to kind of know for sure, especially because I'm reporting back to you guys. So I did go have a hydrostatic body fat test done, and sure enough, it was mostly fat, which, yeah, I was not too happy about. And I wasn't even done with my denial, being in denial after the body fat test, because it was, you know, it was just so out of the blue. It was such a large amount of weight in such a short time when I had been eating so clean and working out so well. I just found it hard to believe. So after that day of having my body fat tested, I went home and I started researching, like, you know, how accurate is underwater weighing, which it is pretty accurate. But I was like, maybe there's something that, you know, would prove that it's possibly not all fat. And, you know, I actually did come across a couple good articles discussing their accuracy, and I've linked to them in the blog post, so you can check that out. And it is true, actually, that as far as using it as a comparison on one person over time, it becomes less accurate. In that way, and you can read the article to figure out why, because it's kind of scientific. So in that case, it can be less accurate. However, I have had a lot of body fat tests now, you know, over the last few years, and I've had enough to know that it's about right. So I figured, okay, it really is fat. It's really on my body, and it got there somehow, and I don't know how. So that's what I kind of had to figure out next. So the two questions I wanted to answer was, why did I gain the weight and how could I fix it? So, you know, I kind of tried to scrutinize everything. As you guys know, I'm that type of person, I scrutinize everything. And I finally came up with basically 4 different factors that I felt could have caused this. And I'm going to talk about each of them. And, you know, if you're getting bored, just turn off the video or the podcast, but I think that this is useful information for some of you guys out there, so that's why I'm sharing every little nitty-gritty detail. So the 4 possible factors that caused the weight gain when I felt like I was doing so well was 1, too much kale. We're going to talk about that in a second. 2, intensity at my CrossFit was higher, which can equal possible excess raised cortisol, which can equal compromised adrenals, which can equal fat gain. So we'll talk about that. The 3rd possible factor was that something in my diet was no longer agreeing with me. One hunch that I had was in regards to fats and just certain foods. So we'll talk about that. And then the 4th thing was just my Lyme symptoms were worse significantly in those recent, you know, weeks, and which could have affected my hormones, which can cause weight gain despite your best efforts. So I'm going to talk about each of these now. So the first point was, maybe I'm eating too much kale, raw kale. So I have to tell you guys, I really don't believe that eating foods with goitrogens, they're called goitrogens, which what that means is like they have anti-thyroid properties essentially. And a lot of foods in the brassica family are considered goitrogens, anti-thyroid. I don't really believe that eating those can actually impair your thyroid function, unless you do it to extremes, which I tend to do stuff like that. I tend to be extreme. So, you know, in all honesty, looking back on what I had been doing, I eat 1 to 2 whole heads of raw kale a day, every single day. For several months I had been doing it, and I had never had an issue with it before and maintaining my weight. Like I said, I had been maintaining 124.5 for several months. All during that time I was eating a raw kale salad every day. And again, I'm not talking about a little salad, it was an entire head of kale. And I didn't have any problems. So I'm still kind of leery that this is actually a contributor to my 5-pound weight gain, but I have to put it in there because it's certainly possible. And you know, I have to look at every aspect, right? So I am putting this in here. It's possible that I took it to extremes. And you know, as in fact, you know, while we were the last few months, I had even started eating 2 heads of kale a day sometimes, just because I had started CrossFitting more and I was hungrier, and so sometimes I'd eat a whole head of kale in the afternoon and I'd eat another one at night, you know, so this is a lot of kale. So maybe that did contribute. If that affected my thyroid function, obviously then my metabolism wouldn't work as well, which means that I would gain weight, or basically not be able to metabolize as many calories without gaining weight. Now, I still don't know if this was the cause of these issues with weight gain, because I didn't have time to only change one thing at a time. So with the stuff I'm going to talk about, I changed multiple things all at once, because most important to me is just getting back to the body that I was at before. So I don't know if that in particular helped, or if the other things, or all of them together. I won't know that. But what I did decide to do was take out my kale salads. I didn't take them out completely, but instead of having 1 a day, I have more like 1 to 2 a week. And so I'm still eating it, just a lot less often, just as a way of, you know, I'll never know until I try it, right? So that's one change that I decided to try making. Now, just for any of you guys who weren't aware of this, or who might get freaked out about this, I do want to tell you that the goitrogens in those types of foods are inactivated when you cook them. So, so as soon as you, like if you cook broccoli or you cook, you know, whatever brassica, the goitrogens are inactivated, so they definitely are not going to hurt, you know, be involved with your thyroid function at that point. But again, I still don't know that I really believe it's a problem. And for any of you guys who aren't as extreme as me, probably you're fine. You know, you're probably having a kale salad a few times a week, you know, or I don't know. So just take this section of this video with a grain of salt. I'm just mentioning it in case, because it doesn't hurt to try things out, right? Yeah, and as an addition to that, you know, like I said, I did eat a whole head of kale from November through April without any trouble with any weight gain at all. So it obviously didn't bother me during that period. You know, whether there was some type of buildup over time that then all of a sudden was affecting me, maybe that's possible. But anyway, that's just food for thought for you guys. So the second point that I wanted to talk about had to do with the intensity and frequency of CrossFit. So one thing that has definitely been different for me since moving is my CrossFit. My new box, my new CrossFit gym, I find to be more difficult and more intense for me. At my old gym, the average WOD, it's called a WOD, W-O-D, means workout of the day. So at my old gym, those WODs would take me 10 to 20 minutes on average. On occasion, we'd have a longer one that took me like 35 to 40 minutes, but it was kind of rare, not very often. So most of the time, 10 to 20 minutes. But my new CrossFit gym, it felt like pretty much every time the WOD was taking me 35, 40, sometimes even 50 minutes to complete. And you know, this isn't like walking on a treadmill or jogging on a treadmill for 30 minutes. This is extremely intense and varied workouts that basically is taking everything out of you every second of it. And so, you know, I was definitely pretty wiped out at the end of them. And I was doing this 4 days a week. And so at first I thought, well, you know, this is definitely challenging, but probably I'll adapt. You know, just like when I first started CrossFit, I was, you know, everything took me longer and I had to do less weight, but over time I got stronger and I was able to do it. So I thought I just needed more time and that my body would adjust, get stronger and adapt, and then I'd be able to be fine with it. Now just a little bit more info on what I do at CrossFit. I felt like my previous gym was a little less cardio focused. And this new one, it felt like, yeah, these WODs were a little more cardio focused, which with Lyme is not my strong suit. I feel that my stamina has really been affected by Lyme. For instance, even though I'm, you know, been doing this a long time now and I'm pretty fit as far as muscle tone, I still will often, most of the time, actually finish last, even with all the newbies, you know, that come in and that are not, you know, not as in good a shape as me. They will still finish before me. Now, granted, I'm often doing heavier weight than them and I'm doing everything strict, like I do push-ups not on my knees anymore. I can do the kipping pull-ups, you know, without using a big rubber band to help me and all of that. So that's partially why it takes me longer too, which I'm okay with. But I have just noticed that my stamina is definitely affected. I can do very short bursts of things, but in a workout that has all these different things that you have to do and then you have to do 5 rounds of it, I have to rest every 10-15 seconds. I can't just like keep going, whereas I notice other people, they're working out just as hard and they can just kind of like keep going, and I just can't do that. My body won't do it. So I am affected by that, and I think that was why with these new WODs here at my new gym, they were taking me so long to complete because there was just a lot to it. And I had to keep stopping, you know, to breathe for 30 seconds. So they would take me a long time, but it felt like the whole time, like my body was working so hard. And I was seeing results as far as, like I said, with like the weightlifting stuff we were doing, there was a greater focus on squats, and I felt like my lower body is getting stronger. And I really did notice that, and I felt good about seeing that progress. But then there was this one problem where it was like my efforts at CrossFit and my seeming results with strength gains were not matching up with what was happening with my body and the weight gain and the fat gain. So the conundrum was, and this is something that I think other women have run into, which is why I think this is a great thing to talk about. I was working out harder and more frequently than ever before, and yet I was gaining weight, and not only weight, but I was gaining fat, and actually my body fat test had showed I had even lost a pound of muscle. So it was like, whoa, what's going on? So I decided to do some research online to see if there were other CrossFitters who had had trouble with fat gain. And pretty much it seemed like the consensus was, and this applies really to any really intense workout program, So you don't have to be a CrossFitter for this to apply, but the consensus was that CrossFit's great as long as you don't do too much of it. So basically my research kind of led me to believe that for me, I was possibly, the workouts with CrossFit were basically too intense, too long and too frequent for my current state of health. And that was actually leading to raised cortisol levels like too often, which can then cause fat gain. I'm gonna go ahead and put several links actually to a few different articles, very well written articles talking about excessive exercise and how it can affect cortisol and just all of that stuff. And it's a really important thing to check into. And I'll admit, when I was first reading this, I felt really bummed, because I love what I do there. And also the idea that what you're doing isn't working and is like hurting your body is scary, because you feel like you're not sure what to do to change it exactly, or you're afraid that making a change will somehow make it even worse. So it was a very disconcerting, week when I was researching this and trying to figure out what adjustments to make. And I'm going to get to what modifications that I ended up making with CrossFit and the results of that in a little bit later in the discussion. For now, I want to move on to the next possible factor in weight gain, which was that something in my diet may possibly not be agreeing with me anymore. One thing that's been kind of a bigger part of my diet for the last several months was coconut milk. And I kind of felt like my body didn't love it necessarily, but I could get away with having it, and it wasn't affecting my weight. So I went ahead and had it, because like I said, I am fairly limited with foods, and so, I take what I can get. So I used coconut milk a lot in my P3 smoothies. I probably would have it every day. Coconut milk is pretty high in fat, and I wouldn't use a little bit. I would use a good amount. So I was, having quite a bit of that, and I felt like, okay, maybe that's kind of catching up with me. It's just my body's really not liking it. And the other thing I noticed was that my body just seemed more sensitive to fats in general, and it just seemed like I wasn't digesting them that well. And then when I would have carbs, like fruit carbs, that seemed to sit well with me. So that was another thing that I thought, okay, maybe there's something with just the way my body is metabolizing certain foods, and I don't have the right balance of that right now. And the fourth reason was just that, the Lyme symptoms were affecting my body and my hormones, and that was resulting in weight gain. It's not too hard to make a connection between chronic illness and weight, whether it's unexplained weight loss or unexplained weight gain. Chronic illness affects the various systems in our bodies, and how it operates. So it stands to reason that if, an illness is affecting our thyroid or certain hormones or whatever, something tied up with our metabolism, how it's working, obviously then that's going to affect our weight as well. And that's something that it doesn't feel as easy to control, because like I said, I've been searching for 10 years now to find a way to really get better, and I haven't found it yet, but I've definitely found things that have helped here and there. But anyway, that can be a little frustrating, but definitely that plays a role. And I think that this is an important thing to talk about, because a lot of you ladies out there who, are trying out hCG, you also have your own health issues that you're dealing with, whatever they may be. And I do think it's a real thing that it can affect your ability to stabilize or to maintain, and that it can be more of a struggle at times, and that there's nothing wrong with you. It's not like you're making poor choices. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, your body does something else because it's suffering in some way. And, I feel like I actually haven't had to deal with that in a while. I have at certain points throughout this journey, but for a while I've been pretty even keel with my body. It's just been functioning pretty well when it comes to my weight. And this just brought it home again for me. Man, I'm literally like behaving in the healthiest way ever in my whole life right now. And this is what's happening. you know? And so it's so frustrating, but it does, hormones are so powerful. These different systems in our body are so powerful that it really isn't just calories in and calories out, or how many hours a day you work out. There are other things that do affect it, and that's why I'm a very firm advocate in researching and analyzing, and not just going off of what everyone else says, but finding what works for you and trying to figure out what may not be working. And I think that's a huge thing, because every time I do that, I find a solution. You know, with what I've done with my body the last few years, the reason I have lost the weight to start with, the reason I've kept it off, the reason I've been able to lose a few pounds here and there without hCG is because I analyze and I research, and then I make changes and I try them out, and they have worked, you know. So next I want to talk about what didn't work to bring my weight back down. So I think for a lot of us, when we gain weight, our first line of defense is to try going low carb, right? It seems like that's always the first fallback. And it does definitely work, you know, sometimes. You know, so that was what I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to try first. Now, I haven't had to be eating low carb for a long time. I haven't had to do that to maintain my weight. With that said, though, I eat very clean. I don't eat processed foods. I really don't eat refined sugar anymore, except when I go to Thai food and it's in the curry. But outside of that, I never eat sugar or honey or anything like that. My sweets are in the form of whole fruits that I blender up with some ice and stevia. I occasionally have non-gluten grains, but this is very occasional, so I'll have like rice or organic corn, something, you know, organic corn tortillas. We'll make like tacos once in a while, but this is kind of rare. It's like a every couple week type thing usually that I'll do that. I've been gluten-free for 3 years, no gluten whatsoever, but I seem to be able to eat like the rice and the organic corn, so I do on occasion, and that's been fine for me. You know, I haven't needed to be super low carb, so that's been a nice thing. So trying out low carb for me this time would be a little different, because I'm for the most part dairy-free now. I don't eat cheese or yogurt or milk or anything anymore. And I'm also nut-free, and I'm not saying everyone else needs to do that. It's just another couple food groups that my body doesn't digest too well, so I took those out. So for me, going low carb would really be, you know, meat and vegetables for the most part. If I did this, you know, maybe some coconut milk, and then I do eat seeds like not nut butters, but like sunflower seed butter and stuff like that. So that's what I decided to try out. Now, since it's been so long since I really ate low carb for any number of days, I was actually a little nervous about how it would affect how I felt at CrossFit. Because CrossFit's so intense, it kind of requires carbs in order to feel good at the workouts. So I wasn't really sure how that was gonna go, and I was nervous about it because there's no way I'm stopping CrossFit. The first few days were fine, and that's because I had enough glycogen stores, which is kind of like a sugar-water mixture that is stored in your muscles and in your liver. I had enough of that to fuel the first few days of workouts. However, by day 4 of eating low carb, I felt like CRAP at CrossFit. Total and utter crap. I couldn't even finish the WOD, which I don't even remember the last time I couldn't complete a workout at CrossFit. I literally, there was no energy in me. And not only that, some of the movements I was doing that normally felt fine, I actually almost injured myself that day. I guess, you know, when you don't have that extra cushioning, I guess, with the glycogen in your muscles, you know, maybe it does change how things operate. And I actually felt like I was pinching stuff. I hurt my shoulder that day, and I felt awful. So after that, it was basically like, okay, that's not gonna work. So, you know, and I thought, well, maybe if I keep at it, my body will eventually transition. So that's another thing is, you know, usually when you first go low carb, you do have a withdrawal period after a few days where you do feel like crap and you have a headache and you have no energy. But then usually your body will adapt and you'll feel better, and your body will get used to, you know, operating without the carbs, and you'll be fine. But I did do a bunch of research online, and basically the research showed me that when it comes to CrossFit style workouts, basically that you just have to have carbs, some type of carbs, in order to fuel those workouts. Because it's so anaerobic in nature, the type of workout that it is, basically they're just saying you're not going to be able to get away with eating really low carb and doing that type of a workout. However, not all of you do CrossFit, so I did do some research on how to feel good working out without carbs. So I'm going to link to several articles in the blog post for you guys to check out. Again, really good articles that talk about working out with a low carb intake, the transition, how best to do it, like when to eat your carbs, the ones that you do eat and stuff like that. So definitely for certain kinds of working out, the things said in these articles can apply, and you can be low carb and work out. But like I said, for what I'm doing, it shows that low carb doesn't mesh with CrossFit, which is okay because I ended up finding another solution that has worked for me, and so that's what counts. But I want to still share that with you guys in case you're doing some other form of working out and you want to switch over to low carb or stay low carb. So now I want to move on to what is working for me, because you want to know. I don't want to leave this at a sour note and like, oh, I don't know what to do, because I did figure it out what's working for me. So just a little over a month ago, or maybe now about 6 weeks, I was 129 pounds, and I'm now back consistently between 125 and 126 and a half. So I'm getting close back to my comfy number, which was 124 and a half. And I'm not even so much concerned about completely getting back there, but just I'm glad I've found something that's working well for my body, and just bringing it back down a little bit. And also the changes I made that are bringing my weight back down, I know they've been positive because my clothes are actually fitting better again too, like my little size 2 jeans. They fit more comfortably again, so I definitely know that I've lost some fat. So the three major changes that I've made in the last 6 weeks are I'm actually eating higher carb and less fat. 2, a little less CrossFit, bigger focus on weightlifting, less focus on cardio, and 3, eating less kale. So I'm going to talk about each of these 3 in detail now. The first one has to do with higher carb, less fat. So you might be thinking like, wait, did I hear that right? A low fat, high carb diet, isn't that like super 80s? So this is not the same type of low fat, high carb diet from the 80s where you eat, tons of whole grain pasta and non-fat milk and stuff like that. So there's no non-fat milk in my fridge. So in my experimentation, I got that feeling that like my body seemed more sensitive to fats lately. This has not been the whole time, so don't think that hCG caused that. I've been eating higher fat many of occasions in the past with no problem. But just for some reason lately, I felt like I was sensitive to fats, especially the coconut milk. And then also in thinking about it, I thought with how hard my workouts were and stuff, is like, maybe my body is kind of just kind of more adapted to carb burning, because since the type of workout I do requires glycogen and carbs to burn, I thought, okay, maybe my body's just more adapted to that, which if that's the case and I can find a way to maintain, fine. I can work with that. I like fruit. So my question to myself was, what would happen if I ate more carbs and less fat for a little while? And for me, the more carbs would be in the form of fruit. So what I did was, like, I eat a lot of P3 smoothies. In the past, they would involve like a good amount of coconut milk. And I have a couple recipes of ones that I love that have been fine for me for a long time that I'll post a link to in the article. So I would have that daily. I switched that up a bit, and so now my P3 smoothies are more like slushies, and they're frozen fruit, ice, and stevia and water, and that's it. So there's no fat in them now, whereas before, there was a half cup of coconut milk in one smoothie. So now it's like more fruit and then no fat, and I'll have a couple of those a day sometimes because there's not as many calories in them either, so I'll eat more of that. So I'm eating a lot more fruit for my little smoothie things. The other thing is, even though I'm not like counting fat grams or counting calories, I'm just more like conscientiously eating less fat. So sometimes I'm eating leaner cuts of meat. Before, I would kind of slather a lot of butter on everything, and I'm kind of like just not doing that as much. So just things like that, you know, or like for instance, sunflower seed butter, which is a higher fat item. I'm not eating as much of that. Some days I don't eat it at all. And so it's not, I don't know if I'm eating less calories. I guess that's possible, but I feel like instead what I'm doing is just eating more of other foods, and it's a little bit more carby. Again, though, those carbs are not coming from grains. They're really coming mostly from fruit and vegetables and meat and stuff. So I basically just shifted my focus in that way. And I have to tell you, my body is really loving it now. Like, you know, as I mentioned, my weight has come back down of like 3 to 4 pounds already. And that's one of the major things that I've changed. And I can tell my body seems to be operating better with it. And again, keep in mind, I am exchanging, not simply removing more foods, because you know, if you listen to me talk, it might sound like I'm just removing more and more food groups, which could start to sound really depressing, like, oh my gosh, this is the only way I can maintain to just like remove more and more foods. But I'm really not doing that. I'm taking out, you know, some foods, but then I'm putting in more of other foods. Like, I wasn't eating as much fruit before, and now I'm just eating fruits a lot more freely, and stuff like that. So it's really just exchanging, and I'm actually having a nice time, like eating some, you know, more variety actually, and eating different foods and feeling more freedom with my carb intake. Whereas before I felt like, oh, I have to be more careful about that, and now I'm like more free with that, and I'm just being more careful about my fats for the time being. The second major change and adjustment I made was basically a little less CrossFit, bigger focus on weightlifting, less focus on cardio. So specifically, I've reduced my CrossFit days from 4 days a week to 3 days a week, sometimes even 2 days a week. And I am now capping any workout at 25 minutes, even if I'm not done, which is happening quite a bit. So before, you know, I would just keep going, and however long it took me, I would just complete it, even if it took me 50 minutes. Now at 25 minutes, I stop, I cool down and stretch, and that's it. Now the other thing is I am really trying to focus more on weightlifting and not cardio. So for instance, if the prescribed WOD for that day happens to be a lot of cardio, like, you know, 5 rounds of running and rowing or something that's like just mostly cardio, I'll actually just completely skip that workout that day, and I'll just do like some back squats and push-ups or something. So you know, I'll do that. I want to talk a little bit about the mental and emotional side to making a change like this, because I think making adjustments to your workout routine where you're actually purposefully choosing to do less is something that some of you women out there may need to consider at various points, and it's actually not an easy thing to consider. You know, for some of us, starting an exercise routine in the first place might have been difficult, and like, you know, something that we weren't used to, and then we finally got into a routine, and we feel like it's a very important part of our balance and of staying how we are, and so then to purposefully choose to do less is very scary for more than one reason. You know, for me, it was disconcerting because, first of all, I just mentally feel very good after CrossFit. So I kind of didn't like the idea of doing less there and going less days a week. I felt like it was an important part of my mental balance, so that made me nervous. The second thing was I felt like, oh, well, this might be a big part of why I can eat a healthy amount of calories, you know, and not have to count, and just so I was worried. I felt like, well, I've gained 5 pounds, and taking CrossFit out, like, logically you feel like working out less would make you gain more weight. So I was worried about that, like that I would, you know, make a bad situation even worse. So I was concerned about that. And also, it's just hard to modify for me. You know, once you get to a point where you feel pretty capable and you're amongst a group of people, it's hard to like change and do something different than everyone else is doing. I was worried about people thinking I was lazy there or lax, you know, like being too easy on myself, because, you know, part of the whole point of being there is to work hard. And so I was worried about being judged for that. So, you know, to be perfectly honest, there was kind of like this one particular night that I was online researching all of this about, you know, the crossfitting and the intensity and how it can affect your adrenals and cause weight gain and all that. And to be honest, I felt a little dizzy almost. I mean, I felt kind of sick and dizzy and like, you know, just like my core beliefs were being shaken in a sense, you know. Yeah, I definitely didn't feel very good that night, and it was disconcerting. And you know, and it's like if I make this big change, I can't be sure of the outcome, and it could be worse. And then it's like there'll be just that much more to correct, and I won't know how to do it. I won't know how to correct it. I won't know what the solution is. So it was a hard night and a hard week. When I was kind of figuring that out. And I'm just mentioning it because, you know, for some of you, you guys might be going through that, whether you're trying to stabilize in P3 or you're trying to break into P4, or you're trying to start working out and your weight's going up. It's all of those disconcerting feelings happen, and I think they're normal. I think that that's normal, and don't feel guilty about that. Like, let your body experience that. That's part of the ride. And then, you know, and I slept on it. And then it was like, okay, you know, I'm gonna try this. And so that's what I did. Like I said, I purposefully am only going 2 to 3 days a week now. I'm capping the WOD at 25 minutes. And you know, my body has, between the diet changes and that, my body is responding well. I did not gain more weight. So I've seen now that, wow, that was the right thing to do. And it's so surprising. And then, of course, the third thing is just eating less kale. I'm just throwing it in here. Again, I don't know that it really played a role or not, but it was one other possible factor. So I figured I should definitely try making an adjustment in that aspect. So like I said, I'm eating, you know, a kale salad 1 to 2 times a week now instead of 1 to 2 times a day. So that is a change that I've made. So the final result, which I kind of already told you guys, was that yes, I've already lost 3 to 4 pounds, so I'm very close to my original weight that I've been the last several months. Additionally, the intermittent fasting is working for me again, so when I do occasionally fast, I will see the scale come down during the next couple days. So it's another useful tool that I'm able to use. And that's kind of why I think the change in what I'm doing at CrossFit may be playing the biggest role in my weight coming back down, just because of that whole thing with the excess raised cortisol and how that can affect your hormones in that way. I feel like that possibly could have been making it so that the intermittent fasting wasn't working. So I feel like basically I've backed off on the demands of my body a little bit to a level that's more reasonable for me at this time. And so as a result, I feel like my body is able to respond better to these other things that I'm doing. I hope that makes sense. So I want to talk briefly about why analyzing and researching and experimenting is so important. I'm sharing all this because, you know, usually, of course, when you gain weight, the first thought that comes into your mind when you gain weight is like, oh my goodness, I need to eat less carbs, more kale, and work out more, right? I mean, those are the natural things you'd probably think to yourself, maybe except for the kale part, but that would be the natural conclusion that you would come to, that we read about online a lot. But by analyzing what was going on and then coming up with some questions based on what I observed, researching those questions on Google, you know, for instance, you know, searching gaining fat at CrossFit, you know, stuff like that. I then came to some likely conclusions based on that info that I read, and then I came up with kind of like a likely plan of action, like a plan of action that would likely work for me. And in this case, it actually ended up being very different from what is considered to be like the mainstream thing that's working right now. Right now, it's all about, you know, paleo, high-fat diets, ketogenic diets, you know, low carb, you know, not too much fruit, or, you know, all kinds of things like that. And I'm definitely not saying those types of ways of eating are bad. They've worked for me well in the past. But what I've come to realize is that our bodies are not all the same. And within our own body, what works at one time in your life may be very different from what it is in another time. So the things in our bodies change. And so it's much smarter to just take everything that you read, but then see how it applies to you. And then sometimes in the end, if you're just starting to do this and you don't have a lot of past history with yourself draw on, or you're just not used to analyzing yourself in that way, is just to do experiments with things. And sometimes you have to be willing to experiment with something outside your comfort zone. It was scary to work out less and to eat more carbs. I mean, it seems so like not the right thing to do. And yet it was the right thing to do. And I saw that pretty quickly, and that was encouraging. And that helped me to be like, okay, you know, I feel confident about this, and I'll just stick with this for a while. And, you know, who knows, probably in 6 months it's not going to be working again, and I'm going to have to refigure it out again. But to me, that's really what maintaining weight loss is all about. It's not like, you know, you reach a certain weight with hCG, and then for the next 10 years, you stay within 2 pounds of that, and you never have any trouble going above that. I just don't believe that. I think for the most part, as real beings with imperfect lives and a lot of different people in our lives, whether it's health or something someone else is doing that affects your life, sometimes that will end up affecting how we eat, or even if it doesn't affect how we eat, it can affect our weight, you know, like I noticed with possibly my hormones being off or how much CrossFit I was doing. It was affecting how much fat I had gained, even though on paper it should seem like I shouldn't be gaining weight, you know. So I just think that that's kind of interesting. And, you know, in your case, you know, perhaps the answer really is to eat less carbs and to work out more. You know, if you're starting in a place where you're, you know, a pasta carbaholic and you're completely sedentary, probably for you the answer is to do that. But for me, it's like I had been living a certain way for a while. My Lyme symptoms were acting up, and so I had to figure out something else. And there is actually some research out now, especially for women, showing that we do need carbs for our body, that if you're low carb perpetually for too long, that it does indeed affect your female hormones in a negative way, which can then make weight maintenance difficult. So that is just some food for thought. It's not necessarily that you need to start eating tons of bread, but just incorporating carbs at least occasionally. You know, it doesn't even have to be every day, you know, but having some carbs once a week or something like that can be helpful in helping your body to maintain that balance. So anyway, so as a final message to you guys, whatever you do, don't give up. I don't want you to think when you face obstacles or you feel like you fail in one way or another through this journey, you might start to think that, like, you know, you're not one of the ones who's going to be able to make this change, as if you're not cut out for making big changes. Just to show you, you know, the things that I have struggled with myself, that it wasn't all easy peasy for me. I had one round of hCG that was a total flop. In fact, I regained 14 pounds in just 9 weeks following it. Since completing my final round of hCG, I've gained and lost, you know, 4 to 6 pounds on like 3 occasions now, which thankfully I was able to lose without hCG. But I know I did. Obviously, I overate, or I had something messed up with my health that contributed to that and that I had to fix. Previously, I was completely addicted to sugar. I could eat an entire half gallon of ice cream, you know, in one episode of The Biggest Loser. And that wasn't just a one-time thing. I did that frequently. I've dealt with hypothyroidism and adrenal fatigue and all of the issues that go along with that, trying to find supplements or medication and then trying to optimize the levels of how much you take. You know, you end up taking too much or too little, and how that makes you feel and how it affects your metabolism. I was a daily Diet Coke drinker. I had to have my Diet Coke every single day. So that used to be a part of my history. I birthed a child. I weighed almost 200 pounds before my son was born, at 5 foot 1 inches. You know, so my point here is just that I'm not special. I'm a regular person like you guys. And even though, you know, I am coming up on my 2-year anniversary of maintaining my weight, I really do think that this is something that you guys can achieve as well. It just requires that you do a lot of reading and a lot of research to figure out when something isn't working, because that's going to happen. I mean, basically expect things to not work sometimes. Expect P3 to not go the way you hoped it would. And when you expect that, and you know that if you analyze it and try to come up with a new plan of attack, that's when you're most likely to find solutions that will work for you long term. And then obviously, as you can see here, it's like I've had to troubleshoot again and again, here and there, but I've managed to do it, and I've managed to do it despite having health problems, despite having a family. So I really do think you can do it too. In the end, I do think for me that one of the keys to making this a long-term change was making some pretty drastic changes to my eating habits and how I think about things. For instance, when I was addicted to sugar, I used to think that eventually I could eat it in moderation. And what would happen was I would try, you know, I'd whatever, do hCG, lose my weight, whatever, and feel better. I would think like, oh, maybe I can have a few cookies and be fine. But with my history with sugar addiction, I discovered that that just doesn't work. And I had to learn that the hard way when I would start craving sugar again from eating just a few cookies and then wanting to eat the whole package. And sometimes I'd fall off the wagon and do that for a week and eat a whole package of cookies a day for a week. And when I started my 4th round of hCG, I was coming out of that. I had spent a week kind of falling back into my binge eating disorder, and I wanted to get myself back away from that, and my 4th round helped me do that, helped me like clean myself out again, reset myself. And it was kind of at that point that I realized, okay, you know what? I have to realize that I'm just different from other people in the sense that I can't eat sugar in moderation. I'm just not able to do it. And instead of trying to be normal and, you know, be like everyone else, and then it just kept not working, I finally realized like, okay, I need to work with who I am. I need to work with whatever's in my body that reacts a certain way. And when I started doing that is when I started being able to make successful changes long term. I don't crave sugar. I don't crave sugar now because I don't eat it. When I eat it, even a little bit, I crave it. So for me, that was the happy solution that, you know, might seem scary when you're still addicted to it. Like the idea of never having it seems like, oh my goodness, I don't think I could ever take it out. But you'd be surprised how actually just cutting something out completely makes you feel different. You actually feel different. It's not like I'm living every day like denying myself, you know. That's something that I couldn't do either. I couldn't spend every day of my whole life craving sugar. Like I would give in, and I have in the past when I didn't make adjustments in the right way. But I found for me that, oh wow, if I completely take it out, I just don't even crave it, you know. So so that's what you got to do. Find what works for you. And don't be afraid to try something a little scary or a little outside of your comfort zone, and tell yourself, hey, this is just a trial. Like, you don't have to commit yourself to anything permanently. You don't even know if it's gonna work yet, right? So it's like, why would you commit to something that you don't know if it's gonna work long term, you know? So if you decide to try eating low carb, or you decide to try taking dairy out of your diet, or taking sugar out, or doing a certain workout program, sometimes the idea of making it a trial, like, hey, I'm just gonna try this for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that can make it a lot easier for you emotionally to handle making a change. And then as you do it, you'll either see good effects from it, or nothing changes, or bad effects, and then you can go from there. So the last thing, I'm almost done. So important factors to changing yourself, and these were the 3 things. 1 is acceptance. Acceptance of your mistakes, of your struggles. They are normal. I feel like this is a very important part. That's the other mental change that I made. I started accepting that that struggles and failing at times is part of the process, that everyone else does it, most people anyway, and that it's a normal part of the process. And once I did that, I felt it was so much easier for me to get back on track and to feel positive, instead of, you know, punishing myself constantly with guilty, bad thoughts. That just never got me anywhere. So acceptance is really big. 2, you may need to try something extreme. So I guess I already talked about that. But, you know, like I said, I had to cut sugar out cold turkey in order to stop craving it. You have to be willing to do something drastic, which if you're willing to try the hCG diet, most likely you are a person who's willing to try doing something drastic. And the third one was, again, to do experiments and trials. That's really what helped me to make changes, was to view something as a short experiment. And then once I started seeing results, whatever they were, I could then make an educated choice, and my heart could be more in line with it. Like if I'm taking dairy out and I lost a few pounds without doing anything, which is what happened to me, it was much easier at that point for me to be like, okay, I'm gonna keep, not eating dairy. Whereas initially, if I felt like I'm eating all this cheese and yogurt every day and I love it, I love a cheese, and I'm thinking like, oh, I should take dairy out forever. I mean, that's so hard, right? That's really hard to make a decision like that. And I didn't, actually, because I was thinking about it that way. I didn't take it out for like a whole year when I knew I really should. Because that was just like too big a decision when I'm like eating it here and now and I love it. So instead, taking it out just for a week, see how things go, like, my weight seems to be coming down and I feel like I'm eating pretty freely and I'm feeling good and I'm finding other things to eat. And I'm like, okay, let me do this for another week. Do it for another week. Wow, things are getting even better. And at that point, it's like, hey, this isn't hard. I can keep doing this. And that's what was able, to make that change happen more long term. All right, so if you're still with me, thanks for watching. I hope it's useful to some of you. I realize some of these videos are really long and some of you may think something negative about me because of it. But to be honest, I don't care, because, there's something for all of us. I have listened to 2-hour-long podcasts on occasion when it had something to do with my health and it was going to be very valuable information to me. And I've done that. And so I figure for those of you who are having a hard time or who don't know what's wrong, this is the type of stuff that may help you figure that out. So for you, this may have been worth listening to. So anyway, you can find me on Facebook, hCGChica, Instagram, hCGChica, and Twitter, hCGChica too. And of course, my blog, hCGChica.com. All right, you guys, take care. Bye.